Reverend Silas Minter. Uh, he's one of the more interesting characters in my family tree, but and not necessarily in really good ways. But Silas was born around 1790 in Henry County, Virginia. I've seen conflicting dates, and I need to go back and check my sources to see if I have something firm. But his father, John Minter, was the first of two mentors who came into what was then Pittsylvania County when they arrived, and it split into Henry while they were there. Uh, John came with apparently his uncle Joseph. Joseph stayed for a few years and then left and moved to Wolford County, Kentucky, which is a little edit here because I didn't know my geography too well. I had initially said that Wolford County, Kentucky was down the Ohio River from Lexington, which would have been hard to do because Lexington's not on the Ohio River. It is to the west of Lexington. So, correction made. If you wonder where I am, I'm in Chatham County, North Carolina, thinking I was coming back here to spring-like weather, and it's pretty cold today. But John stayed in Henry County. Their their transaction records that give us a track of him being in court, either a lot of land disputes in those days, and as there are now, but maybe even more so then. And he was on both sides of land disputes at different times there. But uh, there are other things that indicate there was something wrong uh, with John Minter. No idea what it was, and so this is pure speculation. But during the Civil War, or during the Revolutionary War, excuse me, he was excused from service, and it was for some reason that he contributed a musket. I think he contributed some other things to the war effort, but he wasn't able to serve himself. And he operated, along with his agricultural holdings, he had a store uh, that I'm really curious and just since I started this particular project, uh, I started thinking about where Silas Minter Sr. was said to live up there on Ravenscroft Road in that area, which is almost directly across from the site of what was Dyer's store, thus the name Dyer Store Road. Uh, and the Dyers didn't come into Henry County until after the Revolutionary War. And I'm wondering if they acquired John Minter's store, because one of the things that makes me wonder is at one point, the Virginia Company in England had representatives in the United States checking their investments and their affairs. They were still investing money over here, and they made a report back to the Virginia Company that's in their records that they weren't going to collect this debt. He had a debt to them. They had probably given him items, or he had uh, either gotten them on consignment or as part of a loan, and they said write it off. That they're but they didn't say why specifically, just that there was something wrong. So you don't know how that what it makes me really question what was the home like, what was going on there. But Silas, Reverend Silas, became one of the better known primitive Baptist preachers of his time, not just in Henry County. He preached as far away as Baltimore on occasion. But the you hear the description for primitive Baptists are sometimes referred to as hardshell Baptists. And while that actually has a specific meaning in some theological writings, it kind of describes Silas Senior. He didn't seem like the most pleasant guy or the most thoughtful guy, And I think this may come into, but he was a powerful man in sense of his presence. It seemed his picture hung on the wall of Leatherwood Baptist Church at the corner of Green Hill and Dyer's Store Road. Uh, well into the 2000s, before they stopped having services there. It was, and it the owner bought it. The person that bought it then actually is using it for hay storage. The last time I was back there, but the painting of him had been in there all that time, and so he had a reputation. He, at one time, the reason I say he preached in Baltimore, they have a record of it, that I don't know exactly how long it was, but having gone to a few primitive Baptist services when I was a child, the concept of preaching a long time, somebody thinking it was too long at a primitive Baptist service means it was a long, long time. I've heard 6 hours, and people started getting up to leave, and Reverend Silas was heard to observe, "I perceive that you all can't stand strong doctrine." And that sounds like a person pretty pleased with himself, that he's on top of things. The other description of him that we have, during the Civil War, he was visited by Captain A.S. Minter, who, as I recall, came up. There were Minters by this time, had Alabama, Texas, a large contingent in Texas, Georgia, and Kentucky and Missouri. And this Captain A.S. Minter described him as this: Silas was a hard-shell Baptist preacher of decided ability and violent prejudices. I think that what the captain was saying there with the decided ability, that maybe it was decided in Silas's head, that, or it could have been just the opposite. He may have been complimenting him. He may have said he had a lot of skills in that area, but the violent prejudices, I don't think that relates, because, like I say, this was a Confederate officer coming up, and I don't think there was any consideration given to whether somebody was racially prejudiced in those days. I think the violent prejudices goes more to once he had an opinion, Reverend Silas had an opinion, that was his opinion, and he was going to make sure that everybody else came around to that position. That he was very, and I kind of say that because I know some other mentors who were like that, very, very strong-willed people. And my grandfather, much as I love him, oh man, he had his views, and he wouldn't back off of them. All of that said, Reverend Silas's role in this, it was like when he showed up, it seemed like people kind of deferred to him on certain things. And both Hamlet, doing the examination of the body there, but more so the doctor later who actually did the incision and opened up the head. Just in reading the testimony, you could almost sense that he had a view on it, but that he felt like he had to also account for what Reverend Silas had said. And what Reverend Silas had said was that while that 1-inch cut on the surface, didn't necessarily look like it would have done it, it was the fracture underneath, and had the measurement from one of the Gravely, sorry, I can't remember which one, had measured the width or the length of the fracture, and that measurement matched the measurement of the eye of the hoe. As I said, the eye of the hoe was more like a mattock, a wide mattock is, and I'll have a picture later when I discuss that. But you just get the sense that he was a little intimidating, and I think that's the other thing we have to understand in this, that in in a period of time where uh, communication was pretty limited, newspapers would arrive usually late with national news, but most of the news in a particular area or communication was kind of word to mouth. Things would get passed along. This was a very isolated area. A number of the people, the first men who came into that county, as I said earlier, like one document I have indicates that John Minter had actually been educated at William and Mary. There were more educated men when they first came in. Uh, some of them, their children and grandchildren maybe didn't fare as well, but and very often didn't have an education. You can see a number of them sign. They make their mark and have somebody sign to acknowledge that. Uh, so the plantation owners per se, the Reverend Silas Minter, the Graveleys, the Hairstons. Uh, there were any number of people in the community they were looked up to. Very often they had more education, and if they said something or pronounced something, it was going to carry a lot of weight because there weren't a lot of other sources. And so I think, in a way, it may have been expected for Reverend Silas to go over there, but I just wonder how much he was looking to find a reason to make that hoe work, because I don't know. There was a number of different faiths. There was Brethren, Old Order Brethren, and along with Primitive Baptists and Methodists in that area, and they may have even gone to the church where Reverend Silas preached. So he definitely had some connections in there, and I'll talk about things that maybe we can think about his relationship with Silas Jr. Yes, I was reflecting before I finished this up, and I realized I'd forgotten to mention anything about Reverend John Abner Minter. John Abner was Silas Jr.'s younger brother, probably a little bit before the time of the John Barrow death. He had left. He married Elizabeth Ziegler from Surrey County across the line in North Carolina, and they moved. And I don't know whether she went with him. At one point, he went to the Colorado gold fields to, like a lot of young men in those days, to try his hand there, but came back. And at the time of the outbreak of the Civil War, he was commissioned a colonel by supposedly by Jefferson Davis directly, but I don't know whether that's necessarily true, and that he fought in the Tennessee and Georgia, all the campaigns in the West, was captured at Island 10 above Memphis and held prisoner in Corinth for Mississippi for a number of months, and then paroled and returned to his unit. The reason I brought him up in reference to his father, Silas Friedrich Minter, was that when he left, he also walked away from the Primitive Baptist faith. And Silas Sr., Reverend Silas, never spoke to him again, never communicated with him again. Although in his later years after the Civil War, Reverend John Abner Minter actually ended up as a Baptist minister himself in the state of Missouri, but more in line with the Baptist traditions you see today in the Southern Baptist Church. Finally, I wanted to post a little clip because I don't think everybody, and I don't think very many people actually have been to a traditional Primitive Baptist style service, and I went to several with my grandfather and step grandmother when I was a child. As a child, I never will forget it because I didn't understand it, and my grandfather seemed to understand every word perfectly. But it's a very unique preaching style, and this video will reflect that.
From the dead, in whom, if Christ be not risen, every one of us today, I'll tell you what we are. We're lost ball in high weed. But listen, I want to read this. In the 29th verse of the 15th chapter, Paul's preaching to these people. Else what shall they do which are baptized for the dead? If the dead raise not at all, why are they